Imagine living your whole life believing your family was ordinary, just like anyone else's, until one day you discover a dark secret buried so deep that it tears apart everything you thought you knew. That's my story. And before I share it, I want to ask you two things. What would you have done if this happened to you? And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing the different places these stories reach. My name is Laura, I'm 35, and up until last year I believed my family was simple, ordinary, boring even. My parents had been married for over 4 decades. I grew up with an older brother, Mark, and a younger sister, Hannah. We lived in a quiet suburban town in Connecticut, where the biggest drama was usually whether the bakery ran out of apple pies before Sunday dinner. But behind the picket fences and polite smiles, my family carried secrets that would come crashing down on me like a tidal wave. It all started when my father passed away. His death wasn't sudden. He'd been sick for years. But his absence left a hollow space in our lives. Mom cried endlessly. Mark threw himself into work. Hannah buried her grief in travel. And me. I was the one who stayed behind, helping Mom sort through Dad's things. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning out Dad's study, I stumbled upon a locked drawer in his desk. The key wasn't hard to find. It was taped under the desk like some old spy trick. I laughed at first until I opened the drawer. Inside, there was a manila envelope marked with one word: truth. My hands shook as I pulled it out. Inside were old letters, photographs, and legal documents. And what I read turned my stomach upside down. The first paper was a birth certificate. But it wasn't mine, Mark's, or Hannah's. It was for someone named Evelyn. Same last name. Same parents listed. Date of birth. 6 years before me. Froze. Who was Evelyn? I flipped through more papers. Hospital bills, a faded school ID card, and then a newspaper clipping. My father's face in a grainy black and white photo. Headline: Local man questioned in daughter's disappearance. Daughter. Disappearance. I couldn't breathe. My father had another daughter. A daughter who went missing. And none of us had ever heard of her. That night I confronted Mom. I spread the papers across the kitchen table, my voice trembling. Who's Evelyn? Why didn't you tell us? Her face drained of color. Tears filled her eyes before she whispered, You weren't supposed to find that. Mom, answer me. Who is she? She was your sister. The words hung in the air like a curse. Mom told me Evelyn was my father's first child, born when he and Mom were still very young. Evelyn was 6 years old when she disappeared one summer evening. One moment she was playing in the backyard, the next she was gone. The police suspected foul play. My father was questioned but never charged. And then, for reasons I couldn't understand, my parents decided to erase Evelyn from existence. They never spoke of her again. They even moved to a new town. I stared at my mother in disbelief. You just erased her. Pretended she didn't exist. Her hands shook as she said, It was the only way to survive. Your father couldn't bear it. Neither could I. We tried to protect you kids from the pain. But instead they protected themselves. For weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn. Who was she? What happened to her? Was she really gone? Or could she still be alive somewhere? My obsession grew. I started digging. Old police reports, newspaper articles, missing children databases. I stayed up at night scrolling through online forums of cold cases. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. On a website dedicated to unsolved cases, there was a thread about Evelyn. Someone had posted recent photos of a woman in her 30s who looked just like my mother when she was young. Same eyes. Smile. The caption said, Possible match. Living under a new name in Boston. Could it be her? I didn't tell anyone. Not Mom. Not Mark. Not Hannah. I needed to know the truth for myself. So I drove to Boston to the address listed in the thread. The apartment building was run down, the kind of place where the walls smelled like mildew and the lights flickered in the hallways. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding. After a long pause, it opened. And there she was. A woman with dark hair, pale skin, eyes that mirrored my own. She looked at me with confusion, then suspicion. "Can I help you?" she asked. My voice cracked. "Evelyn." Her eyes widened. For a moment I thought she'd slam the door. But instead she whispered, "Who are you?" "I'm Laura. Your sister." Her face crumbled. She let me in. And for the next 2 hours, she told me a story that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. She hadn't been kidnapped. She hadn't disappeared. She had run away. 6 years old. She claimed our father was abusive, controlling, violent when he drank. She said Mom knew but never stopped him. That one night, after another fight, Evelyn slipped out the back door and never looked back. A kind older couple found her wandering the streets and raised her as their own, giving her a new name, a new life. I sat there in shock. I wanted to deny it, to defend my father. But the bruises I remembered on Mom's arms, the way Mark flinched whenever Dad raised his voice, Hannah's constant need to escape, I couldn't ignore those memories. When I asked Evelyn why she never came back, she said, "I tried. But when I did, your mother told me to stay away. She said the family was better without me." I drove home in silence, my mind a storm. Mom had lied. Dad had lied. My entire childhood had been a performance, a carefully crafted facade. When I confronted Mom again, she broke down. "I had to protect you," she sobbed. "Evelyn brought nothing but chaos. If she had stayed, none of you would have had a normal life." "Normal?" shouted. "Nothing about our lives was normal. You buried a child, Mom. And you buried the truth with her." But here's the darkest twist. A week later, Evelyn called me. Her voice was shaky. "Laura, you have to be careful. He's still watching." "Who?" asked. "Your brother, Mark." She claimed Mark had known about her all along. That as kids, he had seen what Dad did, but instead of helping her, he covered it up. That he even helped scare her away when she tried to return years later. I didn't want to believe it. Mark was the responsible one, the rock of our family. But then I remembered how he had reacted when I first mentioned Evelyn. Defensive, dismissive, almost angry. I dug further. And what I found nearly destroyed me. Financial records. Transfers from Dad's estate. Money missing. Mark had been withdrawing large sums since Dad's death. And in one of the old letters from the envelope, I found a line scribbled in Dad's handwriting. "Mark knows. Make sure he keeps quiet." Hit me like a punch. My brother had been in on the secret. Maybe even complicit in covering it up. I confronted him. He didn't deny it. He just stared at me coldly and said, "Some truths don't need to be told, Laura. You're digging in places you shouldn't. Let it go." But how could I let it go? How could I live knowing my family was built on lies, on betrayal, on silence? So I made a choice. Cut ties. With Mom. With Mark. With Hannah, who begged me to stop tearing the family apart. The only one I kept was Evelyn. Because at least with her, there were no more lies. But even now, months later, I wonder, have I really escaped? Or am I still trapped in their web of secrets? Because last night, as I tucked Lily into bed, the phone rang. Answered. Silence. Then a whisper. "Stop digging, Laura. Or you'll end up like Evelyn should have." So what's the lesson here? Simple. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the very ones who betray you. Tell me in the comments, what would you do if you discovered a secret like mine? And don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. If this story shook you the way it shook me, hit like, subscribe and share it, because the truth always finds a way out, no matter how deep you bury it.